Welcome to the Maria Liberati Show, where food meets art, travel, and life. So what does food mean to you? Well, stay with me. Today's special guest is Todd Cornell. He is an author and a consultant, and he wrote a book called In the Heart of China. You know, it's all about his experiences of living in another culture and learning another culture and experiencing life and food and the philosophy of life through this other culture. And I thought it was really interesting because it reminded me of one of my favorite authors. She's not around anymore, but her name was Pearl Buck. And if you can probably find books anywhere online from her, but her famous book that was turned into an Academy Award-winning film was called The Good Earth. And Pearl actually went to China. This was way back, probably like in the 1920s, and experienced China. I believe her parents were missionaries, and she wrote this whole book on experiencing life there, which was so interesting. So you can certainly find the book, but you can also find this wonderful old black and white film. I'm sure you can find it online if you want to. It's called The Good Earth, and it's by Pearl Buck, a great author. And also, we'll be doing a guessing game. I'm going to try and guess where you are if you tell me what utensils you're eating with. So stay with me. So, do you like guessing games? Well, if you tell me what utensils you eat with, I can probably tell you where in the world you are. So let me explain. When we think of eating utensils, the most familiar ones that come to mind are forks, knives, and spoons. Maybe chopsticks come to mind, but that's about it as far as common eating utensils. But we can't expect everyone in the world to eat with those four utensils, and they most definitely do not. Many countries utilize chopsticks while eating their meals, but just because the utensil shares a name doesn't mean that they're all the same. So Chinese and Vietnamese chopsticks are similar in size and have the same blunt point. Japanese-style chopsticks are generally shorter and taper to a fine point. The size of chopsticks for men and women often differ, with women using shorter chopsticks. Nepali chopsticks are also shorter than the Chinese chopsticks, while Korean chopsticks have medium length with a flat rectangular shape. While most of these countries traditionally use bamboo or other wood to make the chopstick, the traditional Korean chopstick was made of brass or silver, and they were often ornately decorated. Lacquered bamboo chopsticks are common today and are found in more areas than just these Asian countries. Another Asian country, India, doesn't use a utensil like the chopstick or the common fork. Instead, most meals are consumed using the hands. While it might be considered impolite and dirty to use hands to eat a meal, it's very common in India. There are certain customs that must be adhered to while eating, such as using the right hand to scoop, mix, and eat the food. The left hand is used for cleaning the mouth, wiping the right hand, and even picking up scraps from the table. By using this simple method, keeping the food clean is easier, and many follow this proper eating etiquette. If the food is not able to be consumed using hands, a form of flatbread can be used to scoop and to soak up the food being served. This type of flatbread is similar to what is used in Ethiopia. Ethiopians use a large piece of injera, I hope I pronounced that correctly, to serve a traditional meal. The bread is made from the grain teff, that's Teff, and it serves as sort of a plate and is also used as a scoop to bring food up to the mouth. While it may seem like an informal way of eating by American standards, it's very common in Ethiopia. There are several rituals that go along with traditional meals in this country, such as the thorough washing of hands before a formal meal. When the meal ends, coffee is a common drink that's served and allows for a social atmosphere. So in Thailand, spoons and forks are common and are used to eat most meals with the exception of noodle soup, where chopsticks and a flat-bottomed soup spoon is used. However similar these utensils might be to our own, they are not always used in the same manner. The spoon is used for bringing food to the mouth, while the fork is used for cutting and shoveling the food. Putting the fork into one's mouth is not a common practice in Thailand. It's as strange to us as our eating utensils are to them. This method is also seen in Cambodia and Laos, where the spoon is the primary eating instrument. To ensure sterility, cutlery is often served at the table in a glass of boiling water. With as many cultures and countries there are in the world, it should be no surprise that there are so many forms of utensils to eat with. Many countries share similar utensils, while other countries couldn't be more different. However, the reason for use behind the tool is the same: consuming food for survival. As humans adapt and evolve, so do our habits in eating. Utensils and manners are just two examples of the ways in which we have done so. By the way, did you know that Leonardo da Vinci is responsible for the invention of what most of us in the Western world use to eat our foods, fork, knife, and spoon? For more on the foodie in Leonardo da Vinci and recipes from some of his favorite places, get your copy of my book, The Basic Art of Italian Cooking, Da Vinci Style, and you can find that anywhere my books are sold: on Amazon, on my blog, marialiberati.com, on artoflivingprimamedia.com. And today we have Todd Cornell with us as a special guest. He's a consultant, an author, a China specialist, and who also just about released a book called In the Heart of China, which I think is so interesting because actually, Todd, the podcast, actually, since I started my podcast, I've been trying to think of ways to get people to travel around the world without having to travel, because many people have not been able to travel. So I think this is really interesting for us to travel, take a trip to China with you. And I guess, well, first I wanted to welcome you and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So how did you decide to go to China?
Well, in Chinese, they would call it yuanfen. And that means that was sort of something that was already in the making in the universe. And it just happened. Wow. It just, it wasn't planned. It's just, you know, how everything just kind of falls in place. And as long as you go along with the natural progression of things, then you end up where you're supposed to be. And I kind of think that's what happened.
Exactly. That's so interesting. So the book In the Heart of China, is that a memoir, an autobiography? How is the book?
Basically, the Heart of China is a book that I've come to sort of have this desire to write around having lived in the culture for 20 years, lived with the people, speaking the language and reading the language fluently. So it puts me in a position where I have an understanding of the Chinese people and their worldview, their universe view. Actually, they don't have a worldview; they call it universe view. And just understanding who they are and why they are who they are. And there's so much, and I don't like using this word, but it's true. There's so much disinformation about the Chinese. And a lot of it is centered around communism. And so whenever we hear communists today, we always think of China, because that's sort of, I think, in a lot of ways, who that is supposed to represent. And the Chinese have a culture that spans 5,000 years, essentially. And if we go back to the I Ching, or the I Ching, as some people call it, it goes back that long. It goes back 5,000 to 7,000 years. It was pre-Chinese character. And so the I Ching and the balance between the yin and the yang and all of these things, even geomancy, it's something that that expresses the balances of nature. And so the Chinese culture was based in that, and that has influenced their worldview, their mindset, their thought process, and their language, including the Chinese characters. So I just feel a need to try and express this to people and help people better understand the Chinese for who they are, and not for this little blip in time that we're looking at them. You know, for them, 5,000 years is their history. For us, it's 200 years. And when we look at ourselves and compare ourselves to them, they have things in China that you see on a daily basis that have been there for 500-700 years, and nobody even blinks at it. You know, it's such a different way of experiencing life and understanding life. So I learned Buddhism through the Chinese language, through a Taiwanese monk, and learning mindfulness meditation. I wanted to share that. And so that's the first book. Is The Heart of China is a series, and this book is called How Mindfulness Changed My Life. And so this is the first in the series. And then I want to continue the series by writing more about the I Ching, the I Ching, and the Tao, and things like that, which are so strongly connected with universal thought processes.
Oh, that's interesting. Really, really interesting. Yes. So I know you had mentioned, and we were talking about this before, but how going to another country kind of, it doesn't kind of, but it does, it really expands, right, your way of thinking and experience, especially when you experience it as living there, right? It really broadens your horizon, I guess I could say. Is that correct?
Right. Definitely. And I think you also experienced that too.
Yes.
For me, it was going over. I always have had a passion for languages and loving languages ever since I was a little kid. And I started taking French in junior high. And then when I got into high school, I took French, Spanish, and German all at the same time. I couldn't pass Algebra 1A, but I did great with all three of those languages at once. And then I even went across the street to the university here at Colorado State University. And I sat in on Russian classes in the evening. And I was running around with deaf friends. And so I was learning sign language. So that was all in my high school years. So I have this passion for languages.
Yes.
The opportunity came up for me to learn Chinese. I wasn't looking to learn it, but I went to a restaurant in Dallas, Texas, when I was living there, to a Taiwanese restaurant. And one thing led to another. I bought a book and I started to learn. And then, like I said, just following that progression.
Kind of fell into place, I guess. Yes.
Right. And so I ended up in Taiwan. And it was a 2-week vacation. I quit my job in San Francisco working for a hotel as a concierge, and went to Taiwan for a 2-week vacation. And through it all, I ended up staying in Taiwan, China for 20 years. So my whole life was changed. I'm no longer the same person, and I'm sometimes afraid to even think who I would be had I not gone.
Exactly.
Yes, it does change your life.
You know, I think that you touched upon something, and I actually did the same thing. I studied French when I was in junior high. That's when I began studying it. And then in high school, I didn't go, you really had I would consider them the more difficult languages, Russian and Chinese, but I did French and Spanish. And then eventually when I got to college, actually my major, I was intending to be a linguist, but when you study the languages, you also study the culture, because it's so necessary to understand that language. So I think that probably really opened up, being able to experience all the different cultures and a different way of life. So I mentioned, yes, I did live in Italy for quite some time. And, even though my family is Italian, living in Italy and it is a different thing than living here. So it really did give me a different perspective. But, I know for instance, I was in Australia for a little bit of time, and it's a totally different, it's so far away, totally different. And I imagine China too, it's a lot different than, the European way of thinking. Oh, yeah. So I imagine that's really, definitely a lot different, but all in all, it just expands our mindset, and it really opens us up to many, to many different things. And you're absolutely right. I don't know
I always think of, wow, if I didn't do that, if I hadn't lived in Europe for all those years, I would just be a totally different person. And,
Right.
all the things, right, that you appreciate and
Right.
that you're more aware of,
Mhm.
you get to experience by doing that. Wow. So In the Heart of China, you released that in March. Where can people find that?
It's available on Amazon.
Okay. And
It's
go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
digital and paperback.
Okay. And you mentioned something about some other books. Do you have anything coming out? Oh, there you go. Yes, The Heart of China.
Yeah.
Yes, so it really brings out, and mindfulness is a really important, is very important. I know that's been brought out a lot. So is that something, I guess, that's part of the Chinese culture, mindfulness?
Well, the Chinese culture is the foundational philosophies of the Chinese culture are Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism.
Uh-huh.
And so those three philosophies are very harmonious. They work well together. The Buddhism piece is the mindfulness and the meditation. And so that helps us to better deal with ourselves.
Right.
The Taoist piece helps us to better understand the universe and the world around us. And the Confucian piece helps us to better interact in society and be a better person within our social spheres.
Oh, okay.
So that's sort of how that all works. And then I learned Buddhism through Chinese.
Uh-huh.
And then that's sort of because my Buddhist teacher in Taiwan, he also would bring a lot of Taoist thought into and some Confucianism because it's so much a part of the culture.
Yes.
When you were talking about, how living in that culture changes our viewpoints. For instance, the Chinese are very like they practice filial piety. I'm not sure how you say it really, actually.
So what is that? Tell us what that is.
Taking care of your parents, your elders.
Yes.
And so that's something that I saw my friends doing for their parents. And so now I am taking care of my 96-year-old mother. I'm living with her and helping her out. And so it's something that a lot of people don't quite understand in our culture because, well, why do you do that? Why not? And I'm sure that in Italy, it's very similar to that. It's that tighter family thing. But in America, we have very loose family relations. And that I think, says a lot for who we are, which is not a good thing. But, it's something that living in that culture, people will say that. And I say, I learned it from the Chinese.
Yes, it is. It's definitely, I have heard that they do that, and it's definitely a wonderful thing that they respect their elders in that way so much that they do that. And I don't even think it would be really something you have to explain why you do that. It's just showing respect for elders, really. But it is a nice part of the Chinese culture and a nice takeaway, from the Chinese culture that, yes, I think it would be a good thing here too, if more and more people viewed it that way. So that's great. So what I was starting to ask too is, so I know it sounds like you're going to be doing, because I know you were telling us that this has become your passion, this different philosophies. Do you have another book on the table yet, or working on?
Yeah, I do actually have a few books, but one of my plans is to do more writing about the I Ching, the I Ching. And there is some of that in this book. I did bring that aspect in the balancing of the yin yang, the two elements, and how to sort of find balance and be able to be aware of things and how we can manipulate or move through situations. For instance, the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao, he says that we should all study and emulate water, because water is the most adaptable and the most flexible of all elements, because it moves within its environment, but it doesn't destroy the environment. It slowly changes it. And it also just adapts to, moves around, and it doesn't really fight. So that's something that he compares to like a boulder rolling down the mountainside. It's going to destroy everything in its way. Whereas water rolling down the mountain or going down the mountain, it actually nourishes and nurtures the environment. So that's an aspect of how bringing that yin yang concept into play. It's being able to balance these different elements. And so that's something that I really want to do more writing about. That is the foundational philosophy of Chinese culture, and that was written about 5,000 years ago. Nobody really knows who wrote it, but as I mentioned earlier, it precedes the Chinese writing system. And so the writing system was strongly influenced by that. And it's really interesting because I teach Chinese too. I teach Mandarin. So I love to use these examples. But within the language, there's a lot of two character concepts that are made up of opposites. So for example, you're going to have, like, we would understand the concept of black and white, right? You've got these two opposites, and we just think of it as a literal, black and white TV or something like that. But in Chinese, they have, for example, big, little, the two characters together, and it means size. Like, what size of shoe do you wear? What's your big, little? Right. So there's a lot of concepts created through opposites. And then there's another one that I like to use as an example is the open close, which could also mean turn on, turn off. And so that's a light switch or a switch to turn something on or turn it off. So there's a lot of places where the yin yang concept has actually influenced the Chinese language over millennia.
Really, really interesting. Very, very interesting. Todd, thank you so much for being here. And people can find your book In the Heart of China on Amazon and Kindle, I guess, right?
Right. Yeah.
And do you have a website? Can people find you? With you, or?
I presently don't have a website that I consider to be a website, but they can find me at theheartofchina.com, I think.
And you're on LinkedIn and Twitter, I know.
I'm on LinkedIn. Right? I'm not really on Twitter, and that's probably the best place to find me. Todd Cornell on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. All right, great. All right. Well, thanks so much. And, hopefully we'll look forward to hearing about some other books in the future.
Thank you.
And much success with your consulting. Thanks again, Todd.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Maria Liberati Show, and thanks, as always, to my producer, Britton Roselle, and this week's special guest, Todd Cornell. And as always, you can find me at marialiberati.com, on Twitter at Maria Liberati, on Facebook at Chef Maria Liberati, and on LinkedIn at M Liberati, and on Instagram at Maria Liberati. And you can find all of my books in the Basic Art of Italian Cooking series on marialiberati.com and artoflivingprimamedia.com, and anywhere books are sold online. And don't forget my latest book, The Basic Art of Italian Cooking Diaries. It's a memoir about my life in Italy, and it will be a series. So this first series I'm calling Seasons. And again, it's called The Basic Art of Italian Cooking Diaries, subtitled Seasons. And it's divided into seasons. And it's actually a diary that I kept while I was living in Italy. And it has seasonal recipes. And the chapters are divided into seasons. So, of course, there are recipes, but it's like a diary, and it's my memoir. So you can find that, as I said, anywhere books are sold. Actually, right now, it was just released on Amazon and Kindle, and we will be releasing it at other stores. But right now, you can only get it on Amazon and Kindle, The Basic Art of Italian Cooking Diaries, Seasons. And don't forget my channel on Roku, The Basic Art of Italian Cooking by Maria Liberati. You can also go there. You can also go to Vimeo online and go to the Maria Liberati channel, and my YouTube channel, the Maria Liberati channel. Until next time, peace, love, and pasta.